All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We are going way beyond standard music history today to unearth the geographical, spiritual, and psychological roots of the blues. We so often think of the blues as just a certain style of guitar playing or just a genre of sad songs. But as we're about to see, the roots of this music were actually a profound, complex tool for survival, adaptation, and secret communication. It sounds like a totally simple question, right? Where was it born? But the answer is a fascinating mystery, one that takes us far beyond any single time or place. For decades, historians and casual fans have desperately tried to pinpoint that one specific crossroads, that specific town or year, where the blues just suddenly sparked into existence. But the truth is actually beautifully expansive. Researcher Conrad Sidney Bear really hit the nail on the head here. The blues wasn't invented overnight at a single crossroads. It's this massive, complex musical idiom drawn from a huge tapestry of African heritage and American history. It developed over generations, everywhere there was a significant population of African descent, naturally pulling from jump-ups, church music, and African percussive rhythms.
Okay, let's jump into part one, the Delta birthplace and the sound. So while the music developed broadly across the country, specific locations absolutely acted as incubators. One of the most critical primal centers was Dockery Farms. Will Dockery's massive Mississippi plantation was literally its own self-sufficient town. I mean, it had its own currency, schools, a post office, and it housed 400 tenant families. Because of that dense, stable population, it became a central hub where self-taught musicians, most famously the legendary Charlie Patton, would play on the commissary porch and heavily influence each other. Out of these local hubs, a shared musical DNA really began to solidify. Despite these musicians being almost entirely self-taught, core characteristics became the absolute standard. You've got your heavy use of the 12-bar blues progression, that distinct AAB rhyming pattern, and, of course, the bending of specific blue notes. And the guitar, it wasn't just there to keep rhythm. It was quite literally used as an amplifier for the human voice, expressing the raw, emotional realities of their incredibly harsh environments. Now, as this music spread, distinct regional environments directly shaped how the guitar was played. It's almost like regional dialects. Down in the Mississippi Deep South, the Delta blues was archaic, raw, and heavily percussive. Over in Texas, pioneers like Leadbelly were developing a much more refined, deliberate, and sophisticated variation on the 12-string guitar. And then over on the East Coast, the blues brought in a high degree of organization and elegance, borrowing heavily from syncopated ragtime. But where did that solo instrumental voice actually come from in the first place? Let's look at part two, roots in the fields. The guitar really is only half the story here. If we trace the timeline back, we start with pre-1800s West African communal music, which relied completely on social participation. During slavery, this evolved into antebellum spirituals. But notice the massive shift in the 1870s, post-emancipation. As those huge plantations broke up into smaller tenant farms, the solo field holler emerged. That eventually morphed into early folk blues in the 1890s, right before the recording industry of the 1920s came in and standardized it into the 12-bar tracks we know today. The real game changer here is that transition from group work songs to the field holler. Think about work songs. They were absolutely essential for survival and synchronization in forced labor or chain gangs. They synced up body movements so laborers wouldn't literally hit each other with axes and kept a strict pace so no one got singled out for punishment. But the field holler? Entirely different. It was solo singing, used by an isolated sharecropper working a vast field completely alone. It became a unique musical signature to voice their own deeply personal sorrows. That holler was a vital psychological tool. Just listen to how this perfectly captures it. A worker's holler located him in the vast, sometimes mile-long rows of crops. It let solitary workers maintain a real connection to their community across those punishing landscapes. When they heard a specific holler echo out, they knew exactly who was singing. It was a beacon of identity. As we peel the onion back even further, we arrive at part three, magic and the supernatural. Okay, let's talk about mojo, or juju. These were charms, often these little red flannel bags that smelled of oils and were pierced by needles, derived directly from West African religious customs. Carrying a mojo hand was believed to grant metaphysical power. These cultural practices actually survived the transatlantic journey, and they provided spiritual agency, a sense of real control, in a harsh reality where African Americans had almost zero physical power over their own lives.
However, when those retained African religious beliefs bumped up against American Christianity, they were severely misunderstood. Christianity often viewed these traditions straight up as devil worship, and because of that, the blues itself was frequently branded as the devil's music. That severe stigma set the stage for literally one of music's greatest tales, the myth of the crossroads, the legend that certain bluesmen, mostly Robert Johnson, actually sold their souls to Satan at midnight to gain their incredible guitar skills. But here is the absolutely fascinating part. Rather than shy away from that dangerous stigma, pioneers like Robert Johnson and Petey Wheatstraw deliberately leaned into it. Hello, Satan, I believe it's time to go. They actively used that dark, supernatural mythology to build up threatening, larger-than-life personas. It was a brilliant marketing tool, sure, but it was also a way to command respect and fear in a deeply oppressive society.
Finally, we reach the deepest and arguably most important layer of the genre. Part 4, Veiled Meanings and Protest.
Listen to this excerpt from a traditional work song for a second. On the surface, it sounds like a repetitive, bawdy, and frankly kind of silly tune about a woodpecker pecking on a schoolhouse door until it gets hurt. To a casual observer or an overseer, it seems entirely harmless, right?
But scratch the surface, and you find what scholars call veiled meaning. Peckerwood was actually a very well-known pseudonymous insult for racist, poor whites. By using this symbolic language, singers could safely mock their oppressors, voice their complaints, and communicate their desire for revenge right in plain sight. It was a vital, necessary, psychological defense mechanism to safely express the immense anger of their lived experience. Legendary bluesman Big Bill Broonzy explained this dynamic perfectly. He talked about how workers who were absolutely terrified to curse out their bosses would instead direct their anger at the farm animals. By displacing that rage, like screaming at a mule for stepping on their foot, these laborers could blow off steam, signify their profound discontent to everyone else listening, and emotionally survive without facing the severe, real-world consequences from the overseers. Now, as the decades passed and the socio-political landscape of the United States shifted, the need to veil those meanings began to change. Artists like Broonzy eventually transitioned from the hidden protests of the past, leading to incredibly direct lyrics like you see here in his song Black, Brown, and White. This courageous evolution directly paved the way for the highly politicized folk and rock movements of the 1960s. Broonzy also gives us this truly beautiful summary of what the genre is at its core. Ultimately, the blues is far, far more than just a style of playing a 12-string guitar, and it is definitely more than just feeling sad. It is the complex, unyielding, and deeply personal oral history of an entire community. It's a conduit of African culture, an ingenious method of survival, and a vessel for the absolute full spectrum of human emotion.
So, I want to leave you with this thought. The very next time you catch yourself tapping your foot to a standard 12-bar blues progression, or literally any modern music descended from it, ask yourself, what deeper stories of survival, adaptation, and protest might be hidden just beneath the surface of that melody? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep listening closely.